If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing, Flight 3217 of the New York City-Charleston shuttle was almost full when Beatrice Vance hurried in, holding her son Michael's hand tightly. As always, the 38-year-old executive calculated every second. As an executive manager at one of the country's largest tech companies, she had learned to optimize her time like someone managing scarce resources. Her impeccable business suit contrasted with her tired expression and eyes that carried more than just sleepless nights. They carried the weight of 7 years trying to decipher her son's silent world. "Stay still, Michael. We'll be in Charleston soon to take care of that company matter, okay?" she said, gesturing awkwardly in an attempt to communicate in ASL that still sounded more like a sketch of communication than a fluid conversation. Michael, a boy with curious and expressive eyes, just nodded. He held close to his chest a faded blue blanket, visibly old, but treated as his greatest treasure. The embroidery in the corner, done by hands calloused by time, read, "To my dear grandson with eternal love, Grandma Constance." 3 rows. Ahead, Raphael Oliver was helping his daughter Sophia fasten her seatbelt. The 40-year-old child therapist had decided to spend a week in Charleston, his hometown, to visit family he hadn't seen since what happened with Claire, his wife. Despite working daily with the suffering of other children in his office in New York City, he still struggled to deal with his own. "Dad, why is that boy holding a blanket?" asked Sophia, a 7-year-old girl, curious as only children can be. "Maybe it's important to him, honey. Some people have special objects that bring comfort," Raphael replied, adjusting. A lock of his daughter's curly hair, so similar to Claire's. The plane began to taxi. Safety instructions were given. And then, as silence settled in that confined space between sky and earth, Michael's crying erupted like an unexpected storm. It wasn't a common cry of a thwarted child. It was a visceral, desperate lament. Beatrice, visibly disturbed, tried to calm him, but her trembling hands could only form truncated and imprecise signs. "The blanket," she repeated, frantically searching for something that seemed to be missing. Passengers began to turn around, some with expressions of annoyance, others with poorly disguised pity. A flight attendant approached, offering help with rehearsed words that were lost in the despair of the moment. It was then that Sophia, defying all safety rules and the express recommendation to remain seated, unbuckled her belt and stood up determinedly. "Sophia, get back here now," Raphael called out in a low but firm voice. The girl, however, was already walking with sure steps towards Michael. When she arrived, she knelt in front of his seat, and to everyone's surprise, her hands began to move with fluency and delicacy. "Hi, my name is Sophia. What happened?" She signed in perfect ASL. Michael's eyes, still tearful, widened in recognition. His small hands responded quickly. "My grandma's blanket. It fell. I need it to fly. I'm scared." Sophia turned to Beatrice, who was watching the scene with a mixture of astonishment and gratitude. "He lost his grandma's blanket. He says he needs it because he's afraid of flying." The flight attendant, now understanding the problem, crouched down and looked under the seats. "Here it is," she exclaimed, pulling out the precious blue blanket that had slipped under the seat in front. When the blanket returned, to Michael's hands his face transformed. The crying ceased almost instantly. Sophia continued signing with him, asking about the embroidery, about his grandma, about the places he had visited. Raphael watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and admiration. Since Claire had passed, Sophia had immersed herself in the world of signs with impressive determination. "To be able to talk to children no one else understands," she would say. And there she was, doing just that. Beatrice, in turn, tried to hide the tears that insisted on escaping. Years of therapy, ASL courses, and specialists had not achieved what that unknown little girl did in minutes: establish genuine communication with Michael. "Your daughter, Beatrice tried to say, but the words became jumbled with emotion. "Sophia learned ASL after it was just the 2 of us," Raphael explained, now standing in the airplane aisle. "I'm Raphael, and that little busybody is my daughter Sophia." "Beatrice Vance," she replied, extending her trembling hand. And that's Michael, 7 years old, and more wisdom than many adults I know. The embarrassed flight attendant asked everyone to return to their seats for takeoff. Sophia, reluctant, said goodbye to Michael, promising to continue the conversation as soon as they were allowed to move around again. During the next hour of the flight, Sophia made countless trips to the bathroom, always stopping to exchange a few signs with Michael. Raphael and Beatrice, in turn, exchanged shy glances and smiles across the aisle, like teenagers discovering a mutual interest. When the plane finally landed in Charleston, Beatrice mustered the courage for a proposal. Do you have plans for tonight? I'd like to thank you for what your daughter did. Perhaps dinner. I know a wonderful restaurant on Shem Creek. Raphael hesitated for a moment. It had been so long since he had accepted invitations that he had almost forgotten how to respond to one. His evenings were dedicated to patient reports and ensuring Sophia maintained some normalcy in her routine. We'd love to, Sophia answered for him, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Looks like I was outvoted. Raphael smiled, feeling something awaken after a long time dormant. It would be a pleasure. As they disembarked under the mild Charleston sun, none of the four could imagine that this casual encounter, born from a desperate cry and a lost blanket, would be just the first chapter of a much larger story. In the airport lounge, before temporarily saying goodbye, Sophia taught Michael one last sign, that of friendship. Their fingers intertwined in a silent promise, more eloquent than any words could be. Between Signs and Words. Chapter 2. The restaurant on the edge of Shem Creek glowed with soft lights reflected in the calm waters. Beatrice had chosen a secluded table with a privileged view of the sunset that painted the sky orange and pink. Michael looked at everything with attentive eyes, absorbing colors and movements while Sophia kept signing, describing every detail she saw to her new friend. Your daughter is incredible, commented Beatrice, watching the two children who, in a few hours, seemed to have developed a language of their own. I've been trying to learn ASL for years, taking online courses, hiring teachers, but I still feel so inadequate. Raphael smiled with understanding. Sophia learned in record time. Children have this ability to absorb new languages like sponges. After Claire, my wife, passed away, Sophia decided she wanted to communicate with her heart and her hands, as she says. The Iki. Mention of his wife's absence hung like a cloud between them. Beatrice lowered her eyes to the menu, feeling the familiar weight of shared loneliness. And Michael's father? Raphael asked, intuiting part of the answer from the way Beatrice alone took on all responsibilities. Anthony couldn't handle the pressure, she replied with a calm that hid still open wounds. When Michael was diagnosed with congenital deafness, he started to pull away. He said he didn't have the emotional strength, that he couldn't be the father Michael needed. 6 months later, I received the divorce papers by email, along with a typed apology. He didn't even have the courage to look me in the eye for that. Raphael nodded, offering no empty words of comfort. Instead, he raised his wine glass in a silent toast to resilience. To survival, he said simply. To survival, she replied, a fragile smile appearing on her red-painted lips. At the next table, Michael and Sophia had started a game of charades that elicited silent laughter from the boy. Sophia, in her floral dress that swirled with every movement, imitated a clumsy bird, making Michael shake his shoulders in a laugh that, even without sound, lit up his entire face. You're a child therapist, right? Beatrice asked after a moment, contemplating the children. In New York City? Yes, I have an office in Greenwich Village. I work mainly with traumatized children or those with communication difficulties. The irony is that sometimes I feel like I can't help the person who matters most. His eyes drifted to Sophia, who was now teaching Michael signs for different types of fish, pointing to the illustrated menu. I know exactly what that's like, Beatrice confessed. I lead a team of 200 people, close, multi-million-dollar deals, but I can't get my own son to stop crying when he misses his grandma. Michael's mother, my mother, Constance, she was the pillar of our family. She was the one who supported me when Anthony left, who helped me raise Michael in the early years. She learned ASL even before me, saying her fingers might be slow, but her heart understood everything. She was the one who made that blanket Michael never lets go of. When she passed away last year, something broke inside him. And honestly, inside me too. Raphael reached his hand across the table, lightly touching Beatrice's fingers. It wasn't a romantic gesture, but one of recognition, of a familiar pain, of a path traveled in parallel. Claire loved Charleston, he said, looking at the horizon where the sun had already set. We came here many times before Sophia was born. Afterward, with routine work we kept postponing, we always thought we'd have all the time in the world. And then we don't, Beatrice completed, turning her hand to hold his for a moment. The waiter arrived with the dishes, breaking the moment of intimacy. The meal proceeded with light. Conversations about work, about Charleston, about the places Michael and Sophia needed to see. By a tacit agreement, they left the difficult stories for another time. When dessert arrived, a condensed milk pudding that made Michael's eyes sparkle, Sophia asked the boy something that made Beatrice frown, trying to understand. She's asking if he wants to go to the beach tomorrow, Raphael translated. Sophia loves Folly Beach. The water is calm, and there's a turtle conservation project she visits whenever she comes. Well, we're free tomorrow, Beatrice replied, surprised at how easily she mentally rearranged her schedule. Actually, I only have appointments on Monday at the local branch. So, Folly Beach tomorrow? Raphael smiled, feeling an excitement he hadn't experienced in a long time. I can pack a picnic. And I'll bring sunscreen and beach umbrellas. Michael loves building sandcastles, though we've never seen real turtles. The children, understanding that the outing was confirmed, clapped their hands in sync. Sophia quickly taught Michael the sign for turtle, moving her hand slowly like a shell closing. While savoring dessert, Raphael noticed that Beatrice often looked at her watch. Do you need to go? He asked, feeling a pang of disappointment. It's just that we're staying at a hotel downtown, and I confess I'm a bit worried about a taxi at night in a city I don't know well. I can drive you, Raphael offered. We're staying at my sister's house nearby on Shem Creek. She lends us her car whenever we visit. The drive to the hotel was filled with Sophia's animated signs in the back seat, telling Michael about the turtles, about the soft sand, about how her dad made the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the world. Raphael watched through the rearview mirror, marveling at his daughter's ability to build bridges where others saw only abysses. Upon arriving at the hotel, an elegant establishment overlooking Charleston Harbor, Michael had already fallen asleep, the blue blanket firmly clutched against his chest. Beatrice unbuckled her belt and turned to Sophia. Thank you, she said, vocalizing and signing simultaneously, with still hesitant movements. You brought light to our day. Sophia smiled, her eyes shining in the car's dimness. Friends, she signed simply, repeating the gesture she had taught Michael at the airport. When Raphael helped Beatrice carry her sleeping son into the hotel, their hands briefly touched in the process. A subtle shiver ran through both of them, a reminder that beneath the scars and exhaustion, there was still life pulsating. Until tomorrow, then, he asked, standing at the elevator door. Until tomorrow, she confirmed, adding after a pause, Thank you for this day, Raphael. It was unexpected. The best days usually are, he replied with a smile, before the elevator doors closed, taking Beatrice and Michael to their floor. On the way back to his sister's house, Raphael noticed that Sophia was unusually quiet in the back seat. Everything okay, Princess? Dad, she began with the seriousness she sometimes adopted so disproportionate to her age, I think Michael and Aunt Bee need us. Raphael contemplated his daughter's observation, reflecting on how much children see beyond the masks adults wear. And you know what, Sophia? I think maybe we need them too. Between signs and words. Chapter 3. The days in Charleston passed with the swiftness of a sigh. What was supposed to be just a Sunday at the beach turned into a full weekend of discoveries. The trip to Folly Beach resulted in an invitation to visit the Sea Turtle Conservation Project, where Michael was delighted to be able to touch newborn hatchlings with his careful little hands. Then came an impromptu lunch at Raphael's sister Felicity's house, who welcomed the new friends with the typical hospitality of islanders. On Sunday, they explored the Charleston City Market together, where Michael learned signs for various types of fish and fruits he had never seen in New York City. Sophia, always attentive, created new signs when she didn't know the official ones, eliciting smiles from Raphael and Beatrice with her creativity. In the late afternoon, sitting at a kiosk, on the Arthur Ravenel Jr. bridge walk, the two children fell asleep side by side in a hammock, exhausted from playing so much. "It's incredible how they connected," commented Beatrice, savoring an acai bowl. "Michael never opens up like that to strangers. He's usually so reserved, so cautious." "Sophia, too," Raphael agreed, watching the children. "After Claire passed, she closed herself off like a shell. With other adults, she's polite but distant. With other children, she's always on the defensive, as if fearing another abandonment." "And how was it for both of you?" Beatrice asked hesitantly, her hand nervously playing with her drink straw. Raphael took a deep breath, looking at the horizon where the sun began its descent. "Claire had a cerebral aneurysm. We didn't know. No one knew. One day, she was bathing Sophia, laughing, singing those silly songs we made up. The next," his voice faltered, "the next, she was in an ICU, connected to machines. There was no time for goodbyes, for preparation. Sophia had just turned 5. Beatrice covered his hand with hers. "I'm so sorry, Raphael. The hardest part was explaining it to Sophia. How do you explain to a child that their mother isn't coming back? That it wasn't her choice, that it wasn't anyone's fault?" Raphael swallowed hard. "That's when we started with ASL. Sophia refused to speak after it happened. 6 months of absolute silence. Doctors suggested alternative therapies, and ASL was one of them. Ironically, it was by learning to communicate without words that she started using her voice again." "She's extraordinary." Beatrice looked at the sleeping girl, whose dark curls fell over her serene face. "How do you and Michael deal with the absence?" Beatrice let out a sad sigh. "Anthony left our lives when Michael was only 2. I don't think he remembers much about his father. The deafness diagnosis was the trigger, but looking back, I think he was already looking for a way out. Our life wasn't what he had planned." "And he has no contact at all?" "He calls on his birthday, sends gifts at Christmas, always sent by his secretary, by the way. 2 years ago, he started transferring generous child support, far above what the court determined. I think it's the way he found to compensate for his absence. Money was always the language he mastered best." Raphael shook his head, indignant. "I can't understand. If something happened to me, I'd die of worry about what would become of Sophia." "Some people aren't cut out for parenthood." Beatrice shrugged, a gesture that tried to appear indifferent but didn't hide the hurt. "My mother was the one who really helped me. After Anthony left, she moved into my apartment. She reorganized her own life to support us. She was the one who insisted Michael needed a bilingual education, that ASL should be his first language. She learned it with him while I was still processing the abandonment and trying to keep my career on track." "She sounds like an incredible woman." "She was." Beatrice smiled nostalgically. "She had this serene strength, you know. I never saw her lose her composure, even in the most difficult moments. When she fell ill, she continued to be the pillar. She prepared Michael, she prepared me. She made that blue blanket as a promise that, even when she wasn't physically present, her love would continue to warm him." A solitary tear ran down Beatrice's face, which she quickly wiped away. "Sorry, it's still recent." "Don't apologize. Grief has no expiration date." They sat in silence for a few minutes, just watching the sun that now painted the sky in shades of orange and red. The waves gently broke against the sand in a constant rhythm that seemed to lull both their thoughts. "What do you think about us keeping in touch?" Raphael asked suddenly, turning to face her. "I mean, after you go back to New York City. For the kids. They got along so well, and Michael clearly benefits from Sophia's friendship." "I'd love to," Beatrice replied, feeling an unexpected warmth rise up her neck. "Actually, I have to go back to Charleston in 2 weeks. We're expanding the company, opening a larger branch here. I'll personally supervise the process. Raphael's eyes lit up. That's excellent news. For the kids, I mean. Of course for the kids, and she agreed, a shy smile playing on her lips. That night, the goodbye at the airport was less painful with the promise of a near reunion. Sophia taught Michael the sign for "see you soon," very different from the sign for goodbye. It was a circular movement implying return continuity. The next 2 weeks were filled with daily video calls. Raphael installed a special app that allowed the children to communicate by video with better quality, ideal for ASL conversations. Michael, who previously resisted technology, now ran to the tablet as soon as he got home from school. Beatrice noticed subtle changes in her son. He smiled more, communicated better, even with people who didn't understand ASL. It was as if his friendship with Sophia had opened a door not only to a new relationship, but to a new way of seeing the world. In New York City, Raphael also noticed transformations in Sophia. The girl who once hesitated to talk about Claire now shared memories spontaneously. "Mommy would like Aunt B," she commented one night as they brushed their teeth together. "She has kind eyes, like hers." The return to Charleston was filled with anticipation. This time, Beatrice booked a temporary apartment, anticipating she would stay at least a month in the city. "It's more comfortable for Michael," she explained, though a part of her knew the decision had a lot to do with the proximity to Felicity's house, where Raphael and Sophia were staying. The reunion at the airport was almost cinematic. Sophia ran to Michael with a colorful poster, where she had drawn the signs for "friend" and "miss you." The boy, usually restrained in public displays of affection, hugged her tightly, swaying back and forth in a dance of joy. Raphael and Beatrice greeted each other with a brief hug, yet charged with unspoken meanings. "Welcome back," he murmured close to her ear, causing a shiver that Beatrice tried to hide by adjusting her hair. The days that followed established a comfortable routine. In the morning, Beatrice worked at the new company headquarters, while Raphael took the 2 children for activities around the city. In the afternoon, they often met at cafes or parks. In the evening, dinners alternated between Beatrice's apartment and Felicity's house. It was during one of these dinners, while the children were playing in Sophia's room, that Felicity asked the question that hung in the air. "Have you thought about what happens when you go back to New York City for good, Beatrice?" The silence that followed was dense, charged with unexplored possibilities and unpronounced fears. Beatrice looked at Raphael, who was intensely studying the contents of his wine glass. "I've been thinking about that a lot, actually," Beatrice began hesitantly. "About New York City, Charleston, distances and closeness." What she didn't say, what she still didn't have the courage to put into words, was that every day away from Raphael and Sophia felt like a wasted day. That her apartment in New York City, once a refuge, now seemed empty and cold to her. That, for the first time in years, she was considering a move that was not only motivated by her career or Michael's needs, but by something blooming in her heart, still nameless but already with deep roots. Between Signs and Words, Chapter 4. Beatrice's company headquarters in Charleston finally opened its doors. The glass and steel building, strategically located in Silicon Harbor, reflected the island's blue sky and symbolized the new phase unfolding in her life. At the inauguration ceremony, Michael and Sophia sat in the front row, well-behaved and proud, while Raphael watched from the back of the auditorium, a discreet smile on his lips. It is with great satisfaction that we announce not only the opening of Connect Tech's southern branch, but also the launch of our new digital accessibility division, Beatrice declared into the microphone, her impeccable posture disguising the nervousness she felt. Beside her, an ASL interpreter translated every word. This unit will be responsible for developing applications and technological solutions for people with hearing impairments and other specific needs. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Michael, understanding his mother's work for the first time through the ASL translation, puffed out his chest with pride. Sophia beside him quickly signed, "Your mom is amazing." What few knew was that the idea for the accessibility division had been born during one of the many late-night conversations between Beatrice and Raphael, while watching the children play. "The world wasn't designed for people like Michael," she confided one night. "Every door that opens requires twice his effort." "Maybe you can change that," Raphael suggested. "You have the resources, the technical knowledge, and now the personal motivation." That simple exchange of ideas transformed into a robust project that Beatrice presented to the company board. To her surprise, the proposal was unanimously approved, with a larger budget than expected. "It's not just social responsibility," argued the board chairman. "It's an untapped market with immense potential." After the ceremony, an elegant cocktail reception gathered entrepreneurs, politicians, and journalists on the building's terrace. Beatrice circulated among the guests with the ease of someone who had mastered that environment for years, but her eyes frequently sought out the small group formed by Raphael, Sophia, and Michael in a quieter corner. "You were brilliant," Raphael praised when she finally managed to escape her social obligations. "I've never seen Michael so fascinated." "Thank you for being here," she replied, serving juice to the children. "It means a lot to me." "Aunt Bea," Sophia signed and spoke simultaneously, using the affectionate nickname she had adopted for Beatrice. "When are you going back? To New York City?" The question, seemingly innocent, carried the weight of the uncertainty everyone felt. The month Beatrice planned to spend in Charleston had already stretched to almost 3, with brief trips to New York City to resolve outstanding issues. The temporary apartment had already acquired personal touches, photos on the walls, books on the shelves, an established routine. "Well, I have an important meeting in New York City next week," Beatrice replied cautiously. "But actually, I've been thinking a lot about that." An employee approached, interrupting the conversation, to introduce an investor interested in the new division. Beatrice reluctantly moved away, leaving an incomplete answer in the air and a thoughtful Raphael. Later that night, after leaving the children asleep under Felicity's care, Raphael and Beatrice walked along the Shem Creek waterfront. The full moon reflected in the calm waters, creating a silvery path on the surface. The breeze carried the smell of salty air and the distant sound of a guitar. "About what we were talking about earlier," Beatrice began, her high heels now in her hands as her bare feet sank into the sand. "I have a proposal to make to the board. I want to permanently transfer my office here." Raphael stopped walking, turning to face her. "Are you serious?" "Completely," she confirmed, a mix of determination and vulnerability in her voice. "The accessibility division needs direct supervision. The quality of life here is incomparable to New York City. And Michael, well, he's never been so happy and communicative." "And is that all?" Raphael asked, taking a step towards her. Beatrice's heart pounded. In her 40 years of life, she had faced boards of directors, negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts, led teams in times of crisis, but nothing had prepared her for the honesty of that moment. "No," she finally admitted. "It's not just that." Raphael gently touched her face, pushing back a strand of hair that the wind insisted on disarranging. I'm scared," she interrupted, the words escaping like a confession. "I'm scared I'm moving too fast, that I'm mistaking gratitude for something deeper, that I'm looking for a substitute for what Michael lost." "And what do you feel?" "Not Michael, not the executive, not the mother. You, Beatrice." She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel his touch on her skin. I feel that for the first time since my mother passed away, I'm no longer adrift. I feel like I've found a safe harbor, not just for Michael, but for myself too. I feel that—" The words were interrupted by Beatrice's insistent cell phone ring. Anthony's name, her ex-husband, blinked on the screen like a premonition. "I need to take this," she apologized, moving a few steps away. The call was brief, but enough to cast a shadow on Beatrice's previously illuminated face. When she returned to Raphael, her posture had changed, vulnerability giving way to the competent executive who managed crises. "Any problem?" Raphael asked, trying to read the change in her expression. "Anthony. He decided he wants to reconnect with Michael," she explained, her voice tense. After 5 years practically absent, he now decided he wants to be a father. He's coming to New York City next week and wants to take Michael for a weekend with him. How do you feel about that? Confused. Part of me wants to protect Michael from another possible abandonment. Another part knows he has the right to know his father, to form his own opinion. Raphael nodded, understanding. And does that change your plans to stay in Charleston? I don't know, Beatrice admitted. Anthony still has legal rights as a father. If he decides to contest a change of city, it could complicate everything. The moment of intimacy had been broken, replaced by practical concerns and renewed uncertainties. They walked back to the car in silence, each immersed in their own thoughts. The next morning, Raphael met Beatrice at the coffee shop near the new office, as they had arranged. She was already there, laptop open, half-empty coffee cup, reading glasses balanced on the tip of her nose. She didn't seem to have slept much. I researched paternal rights in cases like ours, she said as soon as he sat down, dispensing with the usual greetings. Technically, Anthony can make it difficult for a permanent move to another state, even after being absent for years. Raphael covered her hand with his, making Beatrice finally look up from the screen. Breathe, Bea. One step at a time, she sighed, closing the laptop. Sorry. When I get anxious, I go into problem-solving mode. I know, it's one of the things I admire about you. A shy smile appeared on Beatrice's lips. Are there others? Many, Raphael replied, a sparkle of affection in his eyes. Your determination, your strength, the way you never give up communicating with Michael, even when it's difficult. How you manage to be both so powerful and so gentle. How your eyes light up when you talk about things you love. Raphael, she began, but was interrupted by the waiter's arrival. After they placed their orders, the conversation took a more practical turn. They discussed Beatrice's trip to New York City, how to prepare Michael for the meeting with his father, and arrangements for Sophia during the days Raphael needed to work at his office. I have an idea, Raphael said suddenly. Why don't I take Sophia to New York City next weekend? We can stay at a hotel near your apartment. That way, Michael will have family support during the meeting with Anthony, and you won't have to face it alone. Beatrice looked at him with surprise and gratitude. You would do that? Of course. Besides, he hesitated, a mischievous smile appearing on his lips. I have a few patients I need to visit in New York City, and Sophia has been begging me to see the zoo there. Raphael Oliver, you're terrible at lying, Beatrice laughed, the weight in her chest considerably lessening. But I accept your offer. In fact, I'd love for you to stay in our apartment. It's spacious, and the kids would love it. The idea of Raphael and Sophia in her personal space in New York City, blending into her memories and routines, brought a strange sense of comfort to Beatrice. It was as if two distinct lives were beginning to intertwine naturally and inevitably. What neither of them could imagine was that the trip to New York City would bring revelations that would forever change the course of their lives, not only by Michael's reunion with his biological father, but by long-held secrets that would finally come to light. Between Signs and Words. Chapter 5. Beatrice's apartment in New York City, high up in a building in the Upper East Side, revealed much about its owner. Decorated in neutral tones with touches of blue, it displayed a minimalist elegance that reflected practicality and good taste. On the walls, however, what caught the eye were the photographs, dozens of them, documenting every phase of Michael's life, many with Grandma Constance. Wow! Exclaimed Sophia upon entering, running to the large window that offered a panoramic view of the city. It's like being in the clouds. Raphael entered more hesitantly, feeling like a visitor in a personal museum. He observed the details that spoke about Beatrice, the books on the shelf, a mix of business, technology, and literature, the guitar in the corner of the living room, the well-tended plants on the balconies. Welcome to our home, said Beatrice, placing the suitcases in the hallway. Michael ran to show Sophia his room, eager to display his collection of dinosaur miniatures. It's a beautiful apartment, commented Raphael, noting the clear contrast with his simple home in New York City, an old townhouse in Queens, near Columbia University. It's a home, Beatrice gently corrected. At least it has been for the past few years. Before it was just a place. She led him to the guest room, a spacious suite with a view of Central Park. You'll stay here. Sophia can sleep with Michael if you don't mind. He has bunk beds and is always begging for a visitor. Who can use the top bunk? Perfect, Raphael smiled, placing his backpack on the bed. He noticed a photo on the nightstand, a much younger Beatrice with long hair and a carefree smile next to a serene-looking woman. Your mother? Beatrice nodded, picking up the frame with affection. Yes, Constance. This photo was taken before Michael was born, before Anthony, before everything. It was just the two of us, as it was for most of my childhood. She raised you alone? Yes. My father left us when I was 3. I don't have many memories of him, just fragments, the smell of aftershave, a deep laugh, big hands that lifted me to touch the ceiling. Beatrice carefully put the photo back. It's strange how history repeats itself, isn't it? Michael also grew up without a father. You broke the cycle, B. You're here, allowing Michael to meet his father, giving him this chance. I hope I'm doing the right thing, she sighed, the anxiety evident in her eyes. The meeting with Anthony was scheduled for lunch the next day. Beatrice had chosen a family restaurant at Westfield World Trade Center, neutral and public enough to avoid excessive tension. The previous night was filled with an impromptu home movie session with popcorn and soda, as the four squeezed onto the sofa watching an animated film with subtitles and ASL translation. Watching Raphael and the children, Beatrice felt a strange sense of completeness, as if that configuration, those specific people at that specific moment, was exactly what had always been missing from her life. It was a feeling both comforting and terrifying. The next morning, the atmosphere changed. Michael was restless, alternating between excitement and anxiety. Sophia tried to distract him with games and stories, but even she sensed the tension in the air. What if he doesn't like me? Michael signed to his mother as she helped him choose an outfit. Impossible not to like you, Beatrice replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. Your father just hasn't had the chance to get to know you properly. Today he'll have that opportunity. Raphael watched the scene from the doorway, feeling both an intruder and a protector. Part of him wanted to protect both Beatrice and Michael from potential disappointment, but he knew he didn't have that. Right, some journeys must be taken, some risks must be embraced. The restaurant was busy, as expected on a Saturday. Beatrice had reserved a table on the mezzanine, quieter and more suitable for conversation. Raphael and Sophia would stay downstairs, in an ice cream parlor from where they could see the mezzanine close enough to offer support, distant enough to allow privacy. Anthony arrived 15 minutes late, impeccable in his Italian suit and polished shoes. His expensive cologne announced his presence even before he reached the table. Beatrice felt her stomach clench at the sight of him, not from any lingering feelings, but from the avalanche of memories his simple presence triggered. "B, you look beautiful," he greeted, leaning in to kiss her cheek. His gaze, however, had already fixed on Michael, who watched him with the intensity characteristic of deaf children, for whom sight is a fundamental communication tool. "Michael, this is your father, Anthony," Beatrice signed, and spoke simultaneously. The boy nodded shyly, clutching the blue blanket he had insisted on bringing with him, despite Beatrice's attempts to leave it at home. "He still uses that?" Anthony asked, pointing to the blanket with an expression that mixed curiosity and mild disapproval. "It's important to him," Beatrice replied dryly. "It was a gift from my mother." The conversation during lunch was tense and artificial. Anthony asked basic questions about Michael's school, his friends, his favorite activities. Beatrice translated everything into ASL, feeling like a precarious bridge between two worlds that should never have been separated. From downstairs, Raphael watched intently. Sophia was smearing chocolate ice cream on herself, but her eyes were also fixed on the mezzanine. "Michael's dad looks like a movie prince," she commented, trying to wipe an ice cream stain from her shirt. "Appearances can be deceiving, Princess," Raphael replied, helping her with a napkin. "Some people shine on the outside, but are hollow inside, while others seem simple, but have a heart as big as the world." "Like Aunt Bea," Sophia concluded with the peculiar wisdom of children. She looks like a queen when she's working, but she has a soft heart, like cotton candy. Raphael smiled, impressed by his daughter's perception. Exactly like Aunt B. On the mezzanine, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Beatrice, actually, I wanted to talk to you about something specific," Anthony said after ordering dessert. "I'm getting married again." Beatrice raised her eyebrows, surprised not by the news itself, but that Anthony thought it still had any relevance to her. "Congratulations," she replied politely. "I hope you'll be happy." "Camilla is pregnant," he continued, a strange glint in his eyes. "We're having a girl, and it made me think, I want to try again, B. I want to be a present father to my daughter, and I realized I need to be for Michael too." Michael, oblivious to the spoken conversation while savoring his pudding, noticed the change in his mother's expression. "What's wrong?" he signed, worried. "Nothing, my love. Your father is telling me news about his life," Beatrice replied in ASL, maintaining an artificial smile on her face. "What I mean is," Anthony continued, leaning across the table, "I'd like Michael to spend more time with me, maybe alternating weekends to start, and who knows, holidays." Beatrice felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. For years, she had pleaded with Anthony to maintain regular contact with his son, to take on his paternal responsibilities, only to hear excuses about business trips, unavoidable commitments, the pressure of establishing his own company. Now, when she had finally found balance, when the idea of a new life in Charleston was beginning to take concrete form, he reappeared with demands. "You've been absent for 5 years, Anthony," she replied, keeping her voice low so as not to alarm Michael. "You can't just reappear and demand parental rights as if you never left." "I'm not demanding, I'm asking," he retorted, a flash of his old arrogance appearing in his tone. "Besides, I know you're considering moving to Charleston. Camilla has contacts. In real estate, people talk. I'm expanding the company. It's natural that I'll spend more time there." Beatrice deflected, feeling invaded by the mention of her personal plans. "You can't take my son to another state without my authorization, B." The implicit threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Michael, sensing the tension, tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Can we go now? I want to show Sophia the remote control car I got." Beatrice nodded, signing for him to wait a moment. Turning back to Anthony, she adopted the expression her employees knew well, that of the executive who doesn't yield to pressure. "Let's do this. You start establishing a relationship with Michael here in New York City, gradually. When he feels comfortable, we can discuss more regular visits. As for Charleston, I haven't made any definitive decisions yet." Anthony seemed to consider the proposal, watching Michael, who was now distractedly playing with an action figure he had brought in his pocket. "All right, let's try it that way. But I want you to know that I'm willing to go to court if necessary. I want to be part of my son's life, Beatrice." 5 years too. Late, she thought, but kept to herself. Instead, she called the waiter and asked for the check. "We can talk about this later. Michael is eager to meet the friends who are waiting for us." Walking down the stairs to the lower floor, Beatrice felt exhausted, as if she had run a marathon. Raphael immediately noticed her state and stood up to meet her. "Everything okay?" he asked softly, as the children greeted each other animatedly. "Later," she replied, with a meaningful look. On the way back to the apartment, Beatrice was silent, lost in thought. The children in the back seat of the taxi conversed in their own language, a mix of signs and games. Raphael respected her silence, but his hand found Beatrice's on the seat between them, offering a comforting squeeze. It was only that night, after Michael and Sophia had fallen asleep exhausted after an afternoon of playing, that Beatrice finally broke down. Sitting on the apartment balcony, a glass of red wine in her hands, she told Raphael about the conversation with Anthony, about the veiled threat, about the fear that her dreams of a life in Charleston were in jeopardy. "He has the legal right," she concluded, wiping away a stubborn tear. "As absent as he's been, he never lost shared custody." Raphael remained silent for a few moments, contemplating the city lights that stretched to the horizon. "What if you didn't have to choose?" he finally said. "What do you mean?" What if there was a way to reconcile everything? Your career, Michael's happiness, Anthony's occasional presence, and us. Beatrice's heart pounded at the mention of that us, a small word that carried a world of possibilities. "I'm listening," she said, turning to face him. "I've been receiving proposals to expand my work, universities, lectures, a book on child therapy for children with communication barriers. And, coincidentally, the College of Charleston has a research project specifically on that. I received an invitation to collaborate a few weeks ago. Are you saying—" "I'm saying that maybe it's my turn to consider a move. Sophia would love to live near the beach. My family is in Charleston, and honestly, the place I belong now is by your side, Bea." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning and promise. Beatrice put her glass on the side table and moved closer to Raphael, touching his face with slightly trembling hands. "I'm so scared," she confessed. "Scared of giving myself again, of trusting, of building something that can be destroyed." "Me too," Raphael admitted, covering her hand with his. "Losing Claire almost destroyed me. For a long time I thought I'd never be able to feel anything but pain again. But then you and Michael appeared, and it's like the world has colors again, Beatrice nodded, words caught in her throat. Instead of speaking, she leaned in and touched Raphael's lips with hers, a soft, hesitant kiss that carried years of loneliness, fear, and finally hope. When they parted, they remained in silence for a long moment, foreheads touching, breaths synchronized, as if they feared that words could break the magic of the moment. "That was," Raphael began. "Unexpected," Beatrice suggested with a small smile. "Inevitable," he corrected, smiling back. That night marked the beginning of something new, not just a romance, but a reconfiguration of possibilities, a rearrangement of dreams. As the children slept, oblivious to the transformations happening in the next room, Beatrice and Raphael talked until dawn, planning, dreaming, building bridges between worlds that, until then, seemed impossible to connect. What they still didn't know was that fate held an even greater surprise. A revelation that would transform that casual encounter on a plane into something much more significant than a mere cosmic coincidence. Between Signs and Words. Chapter 6. 6 months had passed since that night on the balcony in New York City. Autumn had arrived in Charleston, painting the trees in shades of red and gold. The mild temperature invited long walks on the beach, extended conversations in cozy cafes, to a life that flowed at a different pace than the New York City frenzy. The new house was in a community on Shem Creek, with views of the dunes and the ocean. It had a spacious backyard, where Michael and Sophia spent hours building makeshift forts, a studio converted into an office for Raphael, and an office from where Beatrice remotely managed part of her operations in New York City. The move had not happened without obstacles. Anthony, as he had promised, had gone to court to try and prevent Michael's transfer to another state. It took months of hearings, agreements and mediations until they reached a compromise. Michael would spend 2 weeks of school holidays with his father in New York City, in addition to 1 weekend a month. Anthony also committed to learning ASL, enrolling in an intensive course, a requirement Beatrice made sure to include in the court agreement. That Saturday afternoon, the house was particularly bustling. Felicity, Raphael's sister, was helping with preparations for a special event, the official inauguration of the Constance Institute, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting deaf children and their families, offering ASL courses, psychological support, and the development of accessible technologies. "The banner is crooked, Raphael," Felicity complained, standing on a ladder on the porch, a little more to the right. Raphael adjusted the blue and white banner that announced, "Constance Institute, Building Bridges Between Worlds." In the garden, Sophia and Michael arranged chairs in precise rows, with the seriousness of those executing a crucial mission. Since moving to Charleston, the two had become practically inseparable. They attended the same school, where Sophia acted as a natural bridge between Michael and the other children, and spent weekends exploring beaches and trails with the endless curiosity of childhood. Beatrice watched everything from the kitchen window, feeling a mixture of nervousness and satisfaction. The institute was the realization of a dream that began to form that day on the plane, a dream of making the world more accessible, more understandable for people like Michael. "Nervous?" Raphael asked, entering the kitchen and hugging her from behind. "A little," she admitted, leaning back against him. "It's strange, isn't it? I've given presentations to hundreds of investors, launched products that moved millions, but I've never felt as much weight, as much responsibility as with this project. Because it's personal," he replied, kissing her neck. "It's about Michael, about all children like him, about your mother." The Constance Institute was born from a casual conversation during dinner, when Raphael commented on the lack of resources for families of deaf children in Charleston. Beatrice, with her entrepreneurial vision, immediately envisioned the possibilities, a center that combined education, technology, and emotional support. Connect Tech stepped in as the main sponsor, with the new Digital Accessibility Division developing specific applications and tools. "Speaking of which," Beatrice turned in Raphael's arms, "I need to show you something before the guests arrive." She led him to the office, closing the door behind them. From a desk drawer, she pulled out an old leather folder, worn by time. "I found this yesterday, when I was organizing my mother's last documents for the memorial at the Institute." Raphael sat beside her on the small sofa, curious. Beatrice opened the folder with reverent care, revealing old photographs, yellowed letters, and official documents. "This is my mother, Constance, when she was young," she explained, showing a sepia photo of a beautiful woman with dark hair and a shy smile. She was 22 here, had just graduated as a teacher, and was starting to work at a special school in rural Virginia. Raphael looked at the photo with interest. There was something vaguely familiar about the woman, perhaps in her expressive eyes that seemed to smile even in a serious photograph. "And this," Beatrice continued, pulling out another photograph, this time of a young man in military uniform, "was Augustus, my biological father, at least the man I always believed to be my father." "You said he left when you were 3, commented Raphael, sensing that the conversation was taking an unexpected turn. "Yes, that was the story I grew up hearing. That he abandoned us, that he went abroad, that he never contacted us again. It was only after my mother passed away that I started organizing her belongings and found this folder. And then I discovered that the story was much more complicated." Beatrice pulled out a yellowed envelope from which she extracted a handwritten letter in elegant calligraphy. "This letter is from my grandmother to my mother, dated 1985, the year I was born. In it, my grandmother mentions the secret my mother carried and how she would support any decision my mother made regarding that matter in Charleston." Raphael frowned, slowly connecting the dots. "Charleston? Exactly. My mother never mentioned any connection to this city. She always said she was born in Virginia and only moved to New York City after my father left. But in these letters," Beatrice flipped through a few more documents, "I discovered that she spent a year here in 1984 as a visiting teacher in a program for hearing-impaired children." Raphael's heart pounded, a premonition growing in his chest. "B, what are you trying to say?" "Last night, after finding this folder, something bothered me. A strange feeling, as if I was ignoring an obvious piece of a puzzle. So I called my Aunt Margaret, my mother's only living sister, and I asked direct questions, ones I had never asked before." Beatrice paused, her tearful eyes fixed on Raphael's. "Augustus was not my biological father, Raphael. He was the man who agreed to marry my mother when she became pregnant during that year in Charleston. They tried to make the marriage work, but he could never fully accept me. That's why he left when I was 3. "And your biological father?" Raphael asked, his voice almost a whisper. "My mother never revealed his name to anyone, not even to him, apparently. According to my aunt, it was a brief relationship, intense but complicated. He was married, involved in a difficult separation process. When my mother discovered she was pregnant, she decided to return to Virginia without telling him. She thought it would be better that way." Beatrice pulled out one last document from the folder, an old birth certificate with some handwritten notes in the margins. "I was born here, Raphael, in Charleston, at the Medical University of Southie, Carolina MUSC Hospital. Raphael took the certificate with trembling hands, examining the date, the location. An impossible thought began to form in his mind. This is an incredible coincidence. Yes, that's what I initially thought. But then she hesitated, pulling a small paper-wrapped item from her pocket. Opening it, she revealed a delicate silver turtle brooch. I found this along with the documents. And I remembered something your sister mentioned when we first met, that your mother collected turtle brooches. Raphael took the brooch, recognizing it instantly, the tiny mark on the back, a minuscule H engraved. By the artisan was unmistakable. It was my mother's, he confirmed, his voice choked. She gave brooches like these to very special people in her life. I have an identical one kept in a memory box. Your mother's name was Helen, right? Helen Oliver? Raphael nodded, unable to form words. My aunt confirmed that my mother developed a deep friendship with a woman named Helen during her time in Charleston, a woman who volunteered at the same special school, and that Helen's husband, Robert, my father, Raphael completed, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet, was separating from Helen at the time, after an extramarital affair that almost destroyed their marriage. They were trying to reconcile, but the process was difficult, with many comings and goings. A heavy silence settled in the office as the implications of that revelation sank in. Raphael stood up abruptly, walking to the window, his back to Beatrice. This would mean that, he began, unable to complete the sentence, that my biological father may have been Robert Oliver, Beatrice concluded in a low voice, and that we could be half-siblings, Raphael completed, turning to face her. His face was pale, but his eyes reflected not horror, but a kind of profound understanding. This would explain so many things, B. The immediate connection between us, the ease with which our lives intertwined. Why Sophia and Michael understood each other instantly. Beatrice nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. When I realized the possibility, I was in shock. I spent the whole night reviewing dates, facts, trying to find something that would prove me wrong. And did you? No, she admitted. The dates match perfectly. Robert and Helen were reconciling, but he still kept a separate apartment here on Shem Creek. My mother met him through Helen during school activities. According to my aunt, it was an instant connection, a brief but intense romance. When my mother discovered she was pregnant, Helen and Robert had reconciled definitively. She decided not to interfere, went back to Virginia, met Augustus, and the rest is history. Raphael sat down again, taking Beatrice's hands in his. What do we do now? We can do a DNA test if you want to be sure. But honestly, part of me already knows the truth. It's as if all the paths in my life had led me back here to you, to Sophia. Home, he completed, lightly squeezing her hands. This changes everything, doesn't it? She asked, the vulnerability evident in her voice. Raphael reflected for a moment, his eyes scanning Beatrice's face, as if seeing it in a new light. It changes some things, he finally said, but not the essential. What do you mean? I mean that love comes in many forms, B. Maybe the universe had a different plan for us from the beginning. Maybe we're not meant to be a romantic couple, but something equally deep and meaningful, a family united by blood, choice, and circumstance. Beatrice nodded slowly, a sad smile forming on her lips. Part of me always felt there was something more to our connection, an inexplicable familiarity, as if we had known each other much longer than we actually had. And now we know why. Raphael smiled, standing up and pulling her into a hug. It wasn't a romantic hug, but one of recognition, of acceptance, of a love that transcended simple categorizations. The revelation could have been devastating, but strangely it brought with it a sense of completeness. The puzzle pieces finally fit together, explaining the ease with which their lives intertwined, the instant connection between Sophia and Michael, the persistent feeling of belonging that both had experienced since their first encounter. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Sophia and Michael peeked inside, their faces animated. "The guests are arriving," Sophia announced, both verbally and in signs. Beatrice and Raphael exchanged a meaningful look. They would talk more about that revelation, explore its implications and find the way forward together. But at that moment, a celebration awaited, a new chapter beginning. The garden was full when they went out. Families of deaf children, teachers, therapists, representatives of associations, all gathered to celebrate the inauguration of the Constance Institute. In the center of the garden, a bronze plaque displayed the Institute's symbol, intertwined hands forming a bridge. Beatrice climbed onto the small improvised stage with Michael beside her and an ASL interpreter strategically positioned. Raphael and Sophia remained in the front row, their faces radiating pride. "Good afternoon, everyone," Beatrice began, her voice clear and confident despite the emotion. "The Constance Institute is born from a personal journey, but also from a collective dream. My mother, Constance, deeply believed that communication goes beyond spoken words, that true connections happen in the spaces between sound and silence, between what is said and what is felt." As Beatrice spoke, Michael watched the interpreter, nodding enthusiastically at each sentence. Sophia in the audience also followed both the spoken words and the signs, a living bridge between two worlds. "A year ago, on a flight like any other, I witnessed something extraordinary," Beatrice continued, her eyes finding Sophia's in the crowd. "A 7-year-old child did what many adults cannot. She saw beyond the surface, recognized a need that transcended words and acted. With her small but determined hands, she built a bridge that changed our lives forever." The audience applauded, many using deaf applause, hands raised and waved in the air, a silent but equally powerful celebration. The Constance Institute is born from this moment of human connection. Our mission is to create bridges between deaf and hearing people, between families and resources, between limitations and possibilities. Because we believe that silence is not absence, but a space full of meaning for those who know how to listen with their hearts and hands. Raphael watched Beatrice with renewed admiration. The revelation about their possible kinship had not diminished in any way the respect and affection he felt for her. On the contrary, it had added new layers of meaning to their relationship, transforming it into something perhaps deeper and more lasting than a fleeting romance. After the ceremony, as guests circulated through the garden admiring the facilities and trying out applications developed especially for the Institute, Beatrice and Raphael found a moment of privacy. "What are we going to tell the children?" she asked, observing Michael and Sophia proudly showing off the adapted playground to a group of newly arrived children. "The truth eventually," Raphael replied. "But there's no rush. They are already a family in their own way. Whatever the result of the DNA test, it will only formalize what they already feel." Beatrice nodded, her gaze lost on the horizon where the sun began to set over Shem Creek. "It's funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? My mother left Charleston carrying a secret, and I returned without knowing I was coming home, as if a cycle was completing itself. I don't believe in coincidences, B. I believe in connections, visible and invisible, spoken and silent. Our story began long before that flight, and it will continue far beyond this moment." He offered his arm, which she accepted with a smile. Together they walked back to the celebration to join Sophia and Michael, to officially inaugurate the Constance Institute, to embrace the future they were building. Not as a traditional couple, but as a family united by bonds that transcended conventional definitions. And as the sun set over the creek, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Beatrice thought of her mother, of Constance, and how she had planted the seeds of this journey many years ago. She imagined her smiling wherever she was, seeing that her daughter had found not only a way back to her origins, but a way forward, to a life filled with meaning and connection. At the Constance Institute, the lights came on, illuminating the garden where deaf and hearing children played together, where hands spoke as eloquently as voices, where invisible bridges were built with every interaction. It was a living testament to the belief that the deepest connections arise in the spaces between sound and silence, between spoken words and made gestures, between the forgotten past and the future that unfolds one step at a time. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Beatrice, Raphael, Michael, and Sophia has touched your hearts. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other narratives that explore the invisible ties that connect us. Find it by clicking here. If this journey between sounds and silences resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Every day we bring stories that reveal the beauty of encounters that seem like chance, but are, in fact, destiny. We await you in the comments to share what part of this story touched your soul the most.